When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ledlow, and enjoy today's episode. Hey, Morgan. It's me, Mark. Happy to have you on the show, Fearless Mindset Podcast. And hey, you got some exciting news that just came out. That news is you just launched a book. Congrats.
I did. Thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it. I did. I launched a book called Welcome to Blackwater. And the premise behind it was when I first started working for Blackwater in 2004, they sent me this packet and it said, Welcome to Blackwater. And then inside that packet, it said, the ways you can die are, and it was like by rifle, by rocket, by IED, and it was just this like 7 sentences of all the different ways that you could die. And I thought, well, that's kind of an appropriate title. Welcome. Now you might die. And here's how.
What year did you go over there under the Blackwater umbrella? What year was that?
Yeah. So I started over there in 2004. They reached out to me in June of 2004, and then I was boots on ground in Iraq by August.
Wow. Okay. 2004. Whoa. I got out of the Marine Corps. I was on leave discharge in 2002 of August. And a week later, 9/11 just dropped.
Yeah, there was a lot of Blackwater guys that had just recently got out. They were all special operations guys, and they were kind of frustrated that they didn't get their war, right? You sit there and you train for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and then all of a sudden the wars kick off, and you're sitting there and you're a civilian, and you're thinking, well, hey, I kind of missed my window. I've been training for this. So there was a lot of those that were coming in that had just gotten out or had been out for, a couple of years. And this was kind of their way of going back as an extension of their service.
So you had that feeling of passion, patriotism. You didn't get anything really when you were in the Army. So this launched, like, you know what? I'm going to go back over there and be a contractor and serve my country as a private citizen.
Yeah, absolutely. So just me, I was in the ground offensive during 2003, March 2003. I was in the ground offensive of Iraq. But the ground offensive was so fast, they flew us in there. We started an air base. I was in the Air Force Security Forces. And then by the time we set up the air base, 2 days later, the war was already so far north that there really was no, it didn't even feel like a war zone. It just felt like you were hanging out in the desert without being able to shower in your mop gear. So I think there was a lot of people kind of like me that say, well, you trained and this is what you thought was going to happen. And then it didn't. So they said, I'll go contract, and hey, the money's good. So why the heck not?
The money was good. I heard you guys were clearing a lot of money back then. I mean, you're getting little bonuses. And I heard Eric Prince was taking good care of you guys on the ground.
He was. So Blackwater gets a lot of flack for being Blackwater, but if Blackwater hadn't existed, DynCorp, Triple Canopy, they had a company called Custer's Battle. Somebody would have been the company that took over those contracts. So Eric Prince, I think his heart was in the right spot. He saw it as a war effort, and he wanted to help out with it, and it was a way for him to be able to expand his brand. And he was very effective. We had probably the best equipment of a lot of the private military contractors out there. The training wasn't terribly difficult, but it was at least some kind of training that we had to be vetted through. So we definitely got the better part of being a PMC in 2004. And I attribute that directly to Mr. Prince. I mean, he took care of his guys. We were making $500 a day. And
wow.
Then
nice.
After, I was 23, I was...
Dang.
I know. I was like, man, I can buy the best knife ever now. And then at the end of your contract, then you would be able to get a bonus. And it was a 10% bonus. So averaging about 550 a day. And then as they kept expanding, they would offer incentives to stay over for 1 month, 3 months, whatever it is. So by the end of it, I was making $660 a day. And I know at 23, I was like, geez, I'm big. I'm big time. And then I got home and everybody's like, I don't know who you are. Who cares? I was like, but I'm big time. I'm big time.
I'm a baller.
Yeah.
I'm a baller contractor. I work for Eric Prince.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, what's funny about all that is from what I read his book, I loved his book that he wrote. And I was just fascinated that the business mind that Eric Prince has and what he did, because he actually provided a support service to the government because we weren't ready for that. Because I read in the book that the United States government was not ready to go in there and do any of that. They couldn't even handle the magnitude of that invasion. And
yeah.
they had been downsized so badly, I guess, that Eric, in order for it to be a functional operation, they had to use Eric to get in there to do it correctly.
Yeah. So what happened is Iraq. So we had Paul Bremer was over there. And then Blackwater got that initial contract. And there's a great book out there by Frank Gallagher called The Bremer Detail. Pick it up. I mean, buy mine too. Buy Welcome to Blackwater, but definitely pick up Frank's book. And they did that. And then it switched from being a DOD mission to a Department of State mission because the nation of Iraq was all of a sudden sovereign because they had their initial government set up. The State Department did not have the protective services. They have a very small protective services, but they had never done anything on the scale of what they needed to build a country. So that's really where Blackwater and DynCorp and Triple Canopy were able to expand, is that you had hundreds and thousands of diplomats over there, and they didn't have the security within the State Department to be able to handle it. So being able to grab guys like me off the street with, you know, a little bit of combat training, and I was one of the very few that actually had spent time in Iraq. It was just one of those things where he had the connections, he had the funds, he already had Blackwater associated with military contracts out in Moyock, North Carolina. So right person, right time, and I think for the most part did the right job, even though he's caught just so much flack for it.
It's unfortunate because he did it, you know, he served the country again, not even only being a Navy SEAL. Then he went in the private sector and said, you know what? I know I can pull this off. And he believed in his dream and vision of being a servant to the country without being a politician and crushing the terrorists that are over there instead of having to crush them over stateside. And so he had the vision, he had the dream, and it became fruition, and he had the opportunity. He just walked through that door. I mean, the guy's a genius in how he did it all. I mean,
well, and he showed it again when they almost eradicated the pirating of ships in Somalia. Like he led that effort, and he just common sensed it, which is something that you probably know as well as I do. The military doesn't do a terribly good job of it, of not only of common sense, but also just spending so much money to do things that are fairly rudimentary, just cost so much extra money. So, I mean, he's an entrepreneur. He served, as far as I'm concerned, he served his country, even in that capacity of being able to create a private security company.
And he gave you guys, I mean, he gave the veterans getting out of the military another opportunity and a new book in their life under the Blackwater umbrella, and gave you so much, you know, real life experiences doing true executive protection, true bodyguard work, because most bodyguards and EP guys do not even pull out a gun in stateside, nor do you have access to ARs or automatic weapons overseas. You don't even see that stateside. You shouldn't even be pulling out a gun stateside unless you're fearful for your life. But it's just such a polar opposite between an EP agent and a bodyguard stateside from what you see overseas in the sandbox. It's two different distinctions, two different worlds.
Oh yeah, 100%. Where I think it kind of went awry was the State Department did not want to. They didn't really want to have oversight. Maybe it's not that they didn't want to. Maybe they didn't have the capacity to. But you couldn't get the State Department people to go outside the wire. So what you had was kind of this perfect storm of people that were trying to get into, a conflict zone that didn't get to do it while they were in the military, and some that did. And then you had the State Department that was very lax. There was really no oversight. We didn't even have tracking devices in our vehicles for the longest time, until like mid 2005. So I think that's where the reputation came from of everybody running and gunning, and it wasn't everybody. I mean, there was some of that, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, we were just there to do a job. And it's like anything else. You go to a combat zone, 95% of it, you're just bored out of your mind. 3% of it, you're like kind of excited. And then 2%, you're like, holy crap, like there's a big adrenaline rush. The book is really about the characters more than it is about Blackwater. No politics. I don't get into any of the strategy of the war. That's not mine to figure out. My entire intent was to write a book that showed that we were a band of brothers. We did look out for each other. I still keep in contact with a lot of those guys. And we bear the same scars of war that soldiers do without that same support system when you get home. So there's a lot of, being a contractor was just the greatest time. But at the end of the day, I don't know if everybody would sit there and say it was worth it.
Right, because you think about what life experiences you missed on by being overseas, and you have family, friends, stateside, birthdays, people growing up, people living life, and you give up a lot of your life sacrificing protection of our country by being overseas. So I get that sacrifice, and thank you for doing that for us while we're on stateside and keeping us safe over here. That's huge.
Well, I appreciate it, but they were paying me handsomely, so I take that. I take that payment as enough.
Yeah, if you do the math, $500 a day, and then whatever the bonuses you get, you're getting paid non-taxable income because you're out of country. I'm sure you're looking at six figures plus. I heard some guys you made millions of dollars over there. That's kind of crazy.
Well, it's interesting. So as a contractor, it wasn't non-taxable. It was if you were there for 330 out of 365 days. You had 80. I think it was like 80,000 was non-taxable. Maybe it was 78,000 because you were considered an expatriate. But a lot of the guys got into serious financial trouble because we were 1099 employees, and nobody really kind of knew what to do with that. So there's a lot of people that underfiled their taxes, didn't file their taxes at all, had problems with the IRS, or still kind of digging out of those problems with the IRS. So and on the one side, big boy rules, 1099. On the other side, I think that as these contracts still remain in place, right? There's still people over there. There's people that are working for federal agencies stateside. To be able to help alleviate that, to be able to pull those taxes out for them. I don't know if that's what they're doing or not, but that probably would have helped a heck of a lot of people. But at the end of the day, yeah, I was put 200,000, when you spend 11 months out of the year, you're going to make $200,000. And then, it just became addictive. You just wanted to keep going back. And your family would say, don't go back. And you'd be like, no, I need the money. Because the second you get home, it's not like the Army or the Marines. The second you get home, that paycheck is done.
And so a lot of guys don't understand budgeting. They're not taught financial budgeting, pay off your debts. Most military guys aren't taught that. Most military guys don't have a multimillionaire mentoring them on financials and how to run your own company. They don't know. They just don't know what they don't know, and they start spending on a nice car. Oh, that house looks pretty. $1 million on that. And the next thing you know, they quit doing it. No more cash flow coming in. They're stuck.
Yeah, those taxes don't stop. I was one of those idiots, right? I bought a Land Rover. I thought I was
beautiful.
Hot crap, and then I lost it in a divorce. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, you got to get the first one out of the way so you can find the one you like. Is what I think. Yeah. So
trial and error.
Yeah, exactly. you get 2 shots at it, and then if that doesn't work, then it's you. All right, that's the rule.
So where are you at now, Morgan? You left Blackwater, and you live in Arizona now. What's your taste on the private sector or stateside? What's your impression on being a security bodyguard, EP agent, stateside? What is your impression of all that, being your experience with Blackwater and Army or the Air Forces and security forces?
I mean, I feel like it's a great job if you're retired. If you have some kind of income coming in, you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do. It's hard to make a living at it. And I don't really know if that's the truth, let's be honest. But at the end of the day, people only need protection in certain places at certain times. So unless you own a company and you have people working for you, I think it's probably pretty difficult to be able to do. If I had, as far as overseas contracting goes, I don't think I would recommend it to anybody. And it's not because it's a bad profession. It's not because there's negative connotations. It's because I feel like you're a Starbucks coffee cup. You're a single serving coffee cup, and it's whether it's for the State Department, DOD, CIA, DIA, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they're going to drink most of the coffee, and then they have the ability to throw you away or bring you back in, right? That's what I think you saw with a lot of the private security companies. Why there's such a bad reputation with them is because they were an easy scapegoat for the State Department to be able to come in and say, that wasn't us. Oh, that was, these terrible people. Yeah, but it was under a State Department contract. I use the term mercenary in the book. So it's Welcome to Blackwater, mercenaries, madness, and mayhem in Iraq. But at the end of the day, like we weren't mercenaries. We were U.S. citizens working under a U.S. government organization. But those U.S. organizations definitely found it easy to hire and fire us at will, as well as just, toss the blame on us at any given point.
What was the most positive experience you had working under the Blackwater umbrella? I mean, what were your takeaways they can apply in the private sector if it's not security industry, it's something else? What were those bonuses you received?
Oh, geez. So I've never claimed to be a badass. I still don't. But when you're working with guys of that caliber, they are ultra competitive, and playing cards, going to the pool and playing water polo. I mean, it could be who can find the longer stick in the shorter amount of time. Like, they are just competitive to the core. So when I got done with Blackwater, I went to college, and I had a 4.0 coming out of college because I looked at it like it was a competition. Like, when I saw somebody that had a better grade on a test than me, I was like, oh, I'm competing. It's against that girl. It's against that person. So that helped me. Ultimately, I joined the ROTC, and my grade point average allowed me to be able to pick whatever job I wanted as an Army officer. So I became an intel officer. I met my wife at intel school, and then was able to parlay that into a really good graduate school. And then even after graduate school, get into some very competitive programs within corporate America because I just wanted to win. And now that I got a couple kids, I want to win a little less, but there's always that part of me that's like, I want to win. I want to get up there. I want to do that. And that's something that some people are born with it, but I had to be taught. And those guys, they just taught me, whether they knew it or not.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but when you left Blackwater, you were an Army officer, and then when you got out of the Army, you went to Blackwater, and then you got out and you went to officer school. I was trying to track that development there.
I know it's like I'm a pain in the ass. Let's be honest.
Okay, no problem.
So I started in the Air Force as an enlisted guy right out of high school, the Air National Guard actually, and then went to work for Blackwater because I made some friends with Force Recon Marines, and they went to work for Blackwater, and they said, "Hey, call Morgan." And I was like, "Why are you calling me?" But that's how it was. It was a buddy system, right? So somebody vouched
Absolutely.
for you.
Your network.
Exactly. And then I went to work for Blackwater. Once I got done with them, that's when I finished up my degree and I joined the Army.
Oh, no kidding.
It was
Okay.
2006, 2007. You know, the economy was crap, and I was like, well, what do you do after this with a criminal justice degree? So I joined their ROTC and went into the Army, active duty as an Army intel officer. And then they sent me right back to Baghdad, literally at one of the cops that we used to run back and forth to when I was at Blackwater, but for like a third of the pay.
Oh, lack of financial motivation.
Yeah.
Wow.
But professionally, it definitely allowed me to get into some of the better schools that I wanted to get into when I got out. So I didn't love the Army by any stretch of the imagination, and the Army probably didn't love me. But between the good grades and having that leadership experience and that downrange experience as an Army officer, it kind of paved the way for me to be able to go to graduate school, get a decent paying job, and then kind of just leave it all behind.
So what was your graduate degree in?
So I was initially doing security studies, and then somebody said, well, what do you want to do when you get out? And I said, oh, I want to go work for corporate America. And they said, what the hell are you getting a security studies degree for? Like, that's ridiculous. You're going to go to DC. So I ended up switching to international banking and finance.
No kidding.
Yeah, I just had to do it, and it sucked. It was terrible.
Accounting, Excel spreadsheets?
Yeah, accounting, finance, statistics. I just finally, but it was the same thing. I just buckled down and I looked at it like I was competing and was able to, you know, by the skin of my teeth, graduate probably. I don't know.
You got the degree, they passed you, professor passed you. It's a pass-fail, right, in graduate school?
For the most part, yeah. It's like you're the dumbest person in here, Morgan, but we're going to let you go because we already let you in.
Wow, what a transition. Holy. So you've had almost three different careers all in one lifespan. And now you're in corporate America, you went Army or Air Force, security forces, Blackwater, and out of Blackwater, Army as an officer, boom, now corporate America. I think maybe all that stuff gave you some great leadership skills from the military, and they thought you were pretty smart with that master's degree, and we'll give you a job.
Yeah, no, that helped. That helped quite a bit. And my first leadership role was actually in Blackwater. I was up in Kirkuk, and I was one of the, I don't know if you want to call them old guard or something, but I had been there for over a year, and most people were just kind of coming into it. So they said, Morgan, you'll be the team leader, and this is your team. And I'm looking at it, it's like Navy SEALs, Recon Marines, Army Rangers, Special Operations guys. And I'd never been so nervous in my life. I had done like 1,000 briefings on how we were going to get to the ministry of who gives a damn. But that first time where you're like in charge of the convoy, you got to get up there and you got to stand up and talk to these people. And I thought, Jesus, I'm a faker. Like I'm a faker in this thing. It doesn't matter. Like, I don't know. It's just a very odd feeling that the Air Force Security Forces guy kind of made it up to that point.
Okay. Now you're in your corporate position. What is the big prize for you now? What gives you that the feeling of self-fulfillment, like you have a purpose again? Because I know many veterans that get out of the military, they lose that purpose. They lose that vision of who they are. They lose that identity. And now, what helped you gain that identity back after you left the military?
I mean, that's a good question. So I tell people, when you join the military, you literally are taught, like, I'm an American fighting in the forces which guard my country and our way of life. I'm willing to give my life in their defense, right? And that's purpose. That is like, holy crap, that's your purpose. And then you get out and it's like, well, what's your new purpose? So I volunteer. I'm the chairman of the board of a nonprofit out here in Arizona that helps adults with developmental disabilities. And then I wrote a book. That was the other thing. It was like, let's get all this stuff down on paper. A lot of these stories are going to be lost to history. So I'd like to be one of those people that can at least document what we did. And don't get me wrong, it's not a serious book. I mean, you're just going to laugh your ass off. It's just the craziest. It's somebody did a review and said it's like the Wolf of Wall Street in combat.
Whoa, that's cool.
Yeah. So I did the book thing, and then not to get too crazy, but I grew up in a pretty poor family. My dad decided that he loved alcohol and drugs more than he loved, hanging out with the kids. So now I have 2 kids, and watching them grow up is, I mean, it's awesome. Like, I almost feel bad for my father that he didn't get that.
Sure.
And they're a huge pain in the ass. Don't get me wrong. But just watch it, like when they figure out something and you're like, God, like that's where the purpose comes from now. So it's not trying to jump up the corporate ladder as much as it is work-life balance. Yeah.
Family man. Because you didn't get that from your father. Because what I see right now with the millennials, I see a bunch of lost souls. They don't have purpose. They're trying to figure themselves out. And, we have a situation of, kids having kids. And a buddy of mine is a former NFL football player, and he has a business. And his whole mission in his business is mentoring the fatherless children. And because there's so many people that don't really have fathers or role models in their lives, they're just running around lost in our country, and they're just like confused on what do I do? And they're spinning their in that gerbil wheel in the cage, just trying to figure out what they're doing, and they don't have that mentorship or coaching, and that's so important that you see that, and then you broke that that chain of events from your dad to you. That's a huge win, victory for your life.
No, I'm exceptionally fortunate. I have an amazing wife that keeps me in line. I tell my kids, my son will start crying. He's 4. And I tell my kids, you know what's hard? And they'll go, what? I'll say, the war. And my wife just starts laughing. So I just try to kind of keep you grounded, and it's fun. It's work, but it's definitely fun. And I was lucky. My grandfather was a World War II veteran.
Oh, wow.
And made himself as successful as he probably ever could have, with a 7th grade education. And they took me in when I was in high school. And he essentially was like, my GPA was like 1.8 or something when I moved in there. It was just trash. It was like D's. And he's like, if you're moving in here, you're going to get your grades up, and you're not screwing around, and you're going to come home every day, and you're going to work on these tractors and these engines that I'm rebuilding, and you're going to learn a trade. You're going to be, so, I mean, he taught me everything from plumbing, electrician, how to rebuild engines. And I hated all of it, but it gave me some grounding to say, okay, if I don't want to be a mechanic, how do I do that? Well, that goes through joining the military, getting your education, being able to kind of like push yourself a little further than other people do.
Yeah, what a phenomenal story. So your dad wasn't in the picture because of his issue with drug and alcoholism and all that stuff. And the grandfather stepped in, being a World War II vet, and said, hey, here, grandson, I'll take you under my wing. That's a great story of just finding a way to make it, just finding a way. And for the viewers out there, the audience, this is Morgan. He authored a book called Welcome to Blackwater. And this is Mark Ledlow with the Fearless Mindset Podcast. I'm also the owner of the Ledlow Security Group. And Morgan and I were just talking about his book and his experiences with Blackwater and working under Eric Prince's umbrella, and just the values of the journey, and incorporating that as a life. And happy to have you on, Morgan, and sharing with the audience what we've been through. And it's pretty awesome. Trying to think of some other things to talk about, like, for example, where do you see the future of contracting overseas? Do you see it continuing to grow?
No, I mean, the heyday of contracting is definitely over. The contracts are drying up. The ones that are out there don't pay nearly as well. It's going away. So what you're kind of experiencing now is there's a lot of contractors that have been doing it for 10, 15 years, trying to figure out, oh crap, what's next, right? What's my new purpose? So that's kind of dying off. The stateside stuff is picking up based on what I can tell. So when you look at all the federal agencies and the federal law enforcement troops that are being deployed across the nation, those guys weren't just sitting around like, playing Yahtzee. So what happens is they'll send ICE agents up to Portland or Seattle, and then they have to backfill them with somebody. And that's where private security is kind of backfilling right now within the U.S. border. Specifically, I know I was listening to NPR, and they said that they have private contractors that are escorting migrant kids down by the border. And that's because you have all those ICE agents or somewhere else doing law enforcement around the federal building. So it's interesting to see it transitioning. I don't think it's probably never going to be as big as it was until, somebody says, "Oh, my grandpa was in Iraq." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, war this, war that." So, but it's not going away either. It's cheaper, it's more efficient. There's people out there that are willing to do it. I mean, it's a supply and demand thing, and it's going to stay.
Yeah, interesting. I had James Hamilton on with Gavin Becker, and he made mention that depends on what happens with the elections, with the popularity of defunding police departments, we're definitely going to probably see a need for increased security operations privately on the ground in very multiple cities throughout the country. What are your thoughts on all that? Do you see a potential for companies to spring up to support that role?
I mean, that's going to be hard. That's going to be hard to do. Just based on, the U.S. So a lot of foreign countries have militaries that are inward facing, right? So you look at most of your Middle Eastern countries are there to protect the citizens against the government. Egypt is definitely like the one that everybody thinks of, where the military goes in and overthrows somebody every once in a while, and then they put in a new government. With our military, it's really outward facing. And that's because we have a police force that is inward facing. So I can see the National Guard stepping into that as necessary. But as far as private security, I personally probably wouldn't volunteer for that job, because if the State Department, yeah, I mean, because they're not going to say, "Oh, the Seattle police contracted whatever." They're going to say Pitney Bowes contracted, like the guy in Colorado. Pitney Bowes contracted this guy. It's all his fault. It's not Pitney Bowes' fault. And I think you set yourself up for way too much risk for, 30, 40, $50 an hour. I hope it doesn't take off, because I think people will be drawn to it.
Yeah. Now, who's Pitney Bowes? The guy in Denver or something?
So the guy in Denver that shot the pro-Trump marcher, I think it was earlier this week or last week, he was a subcontractor with Pitney Bowes, and he was protecting a TV crew, is what it was, and then it turns out he wasn't licensed, and you could chalk it up to all the things and put the blame on the guy, but at the end of the day, somebody paid him to do that. And the culpability shouldn't just be on that individual. It should kind of flow up.
So doesn't the liability fall on the company that had the contract? Whoever they subbed it to would have the liability, whatever company on the ground is that was there supporting that TV broadcaster? Is that how that works?
So it could. The thing is usually what they do is So Blackwater did this with us, right? We were 1099 employees. I had my own company. So my company would have been liable at any given time. And then if somebody wanted to press it, then they could go to Blackwater. And if they wanted to press it further, they could go to the State Department. But it's 2, 3, 4 degrees of separation. So that's what you're hearing now is Pitney Bowes subcontracted, and I don't know if that means that he had his own LLC or if they subcontracted with another company, and then they brought him in. I'm not sure about the details, but it's that separation is the reason why I think it's a very, very risky proposition to be doing some of that stuff, especially if it's armed.
Too much risk, and then personally they can come after you both civilly and criminally.
Right.
And that you don't want that unless you're carrying a $2 million policy on yourself to protect yourself from legal, going to court, attorney fees, and all that. It's just, like you said, it's just not worth the risk. And then I'm not sure. I heard on the news outlets it was the guy, like you said, subbed it out from another major company, and I'm not going to name names. I don't want to start poking fingers at somebody as of yet, because the police department's got to do their investigations and forensics and all that to find out what really happened. But it sounds to me like it was like a training. And also here too, I read that the laws in Colorado are different, where you get licensed by your city. It's not a statewide licensing, but a city mandated license to operate in that city, providing security services. So that's what I hear.
Well, and so imagine you're a GI, you just got out, you're trying to figure out where you're going to, find your purpose, and you get picked up by something like that, and the company is less than reputable. Like, you would have to research all of that stuff. Are you really going to be able, to research and figure out the licensing and the state versus the city regulations versus, I mean, it's just an untenable task for security people to be able to accomplish, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, especially if you just get out of the military, you don't have business background. You don't have no one's teaching you how to get licensed or what to look for or how to vet yourself. You don't know any of that. You figure that out 5 to 10 years in the game. You're like, oh, you have to have liability, workman comp, and this tax and that tax, and then you can call yourself a business owner. And most veterans getting out, they just want to work and be a bodyguard. That's all they're thinking about. And
Exactly.
So I think you're right though. Veterans need to be very careful and make sure, scrub, go on different state licensing board websites and make sure these companies are legitimate, make sure they hold a license and insurance. Otherwise, you could get in yourself a lot of trouble, and just you have to ask yourself, is it worth the risk?
Yeah, exactly. And kind of on that, I mean, there's always hope out there for veterans. I know that veteran suicide's big. Actually, within the private military contracting field, there's been a lot of suicides just recently within the last year. And there's always hope. Please God, I mean, just track somebody down, track me down. I don't care. I'll help you out.
I'm into that.
And then the other part is you have to take advantage of those benefits. Everybody's like, gut it out. Oh, your knees hurt, keep running. Get to the VA, figure out what the VA can do for you. Reach out to those organizations that work with the VA, like Disabled American Veterans. Just Google, for the love of God, if you feel like you're at the end of your rope, just go on Google and just start typing stuff. And sooner or later, you'll find somebody that is willing to reach out to you to help. And veterans are almost always willing to help a veteran. There's a couple of dickheads out there, but for the most part, like people will help you through that journey. And that's what I've helped people through, figuring out the GI Bill. I've helped people through like the VA stuff. Just somebody's gone through it. Don't try to figure it out on your own. Just reach out.
And I'm connected with my podcast. I'm connected to a lot of guys, veterans that actually have a business to help fund and launch veteran-owned businesses. And also, I took out a VA loan, no money down, to buy a house, and I didn't have to really pay anything out of my pocket. The VA paid for it because of our service to the military. And so you have those options. And like you said, once you've been in the military, there's so many opportunities corporately. And you say you served, boom, you have a master's degree all of a sudden because you have a bachelor's degree and a veteran's preference, and boom, the door's open. I mean, my first corporate job was being a banker, and my degree is criminology and psychology. I'm like, I hate numbers. I hate accounting. Okay, all right. If you business develop for a bank, sure, I'll take it. And it's just weird how life opens up opportunities, especially in the military, and people have that great respect to our veterans. So, like you said, there's a lot of hope out there, and that's the reason why I launched Fearless Mindset Podcast, is to give our veterans hope, give them purpose, and just share stories like yours, Morgan. And you can write a book about your experiences and be that hope giver to those lost souls that are out there that are contemplating suicide because they can't make $100,000, $200,000 a year. So what? Make $100,000, make less. Be happy. Be with your family. There's so much more to life than money. About quality of life.
Well, and you'll have to figure out your own purpose, whether that's volunteering, whether that's, your kids, whether that's writing a book. You can figure out your purpose. That doesn't mean you're not going to miss the military. I was talking to a guy that I served with yesterday, and he said, God, I miss the Army. And I was like, yeah, that's because you don't remember like range day, where you could have literally like walked out there, shot 3 times and left. But instead you had to plan for it for 45 days. And then you had to go out there and stay for 17 hours because PFC dipshit can't figure out how to shoot targets. And he's like, yeah, I don't miss that. He's like, but I do miss just being able to look over at somebody and go, this is bullshit. And he's like, you can't do that in corporate America. And you can't. I mean, that's why you need to figure out kind of what you want to do, and then be able to write outside of like the military style. So when I was writing my book, I had an editor that was like, people aren't going to understand this. They're not going to get this part. They're not going to get that. You have to write to the civilian standard. And a lot of times, I hate to say it, it's really like starting an email with, I hope your day is going great. Do you really give a crap about their day? You don't. And it's not a big deal. But that's how everybody does it in the civilian world. So just adapt.
Right. I just got a text message. I was like, oh, shoot. I'm actually on the job in Portland working for a corporate organization as a consultant. That's all I can say. And so I just got a text. That's something I got to do regarding COVID. I'm like, oh, crap. I forgot to miss the text. So I will respond to that actually right now. Yeah, I'm doing working my job here and doing podcasts. Go figure. The beauty of being an American.
Well, you got a side hustle, right? You're a veteran, you got your job, and then you got a side hustle. All these things kind of come together to help you with that purpose that you probably missed a little bit when you got out of the Marines. So, I mean, you're a great example yourself. So don't sit here and put me on a pedestal. I'm just a dude that wrote a book, a really good book, and you should buy it right now on Amazon.
Go. Welcome to Blackwater. By Morgan himself. You're humble, appreciate your humility, but yet also a warrior for serving our country. And I'm glad to have you on, just sharing that experience and giving some veterans hope and some insight on just life itself. And the possibilities are endless.
They really are. And every time I'm kind of getting down on myself, I think, those guys came back from World War II, and you know what they did? Whatever. They were AC repairmen, and they worked at Pepsi, like I have a very charmed life, and I don't deserve anything for having served. Take advantage of your benefits, but also just realize that, I mean, you're doing what you would have done if you hadn't have been in the military.
Exactly.
I don't know if that's uplifting, but hey, whatever.
It's something. All right. I've been told I got to go to report to a certain place to take a COVID-19 test. So I got to go do that. I just saw the text like, oh, crap.
You know what? That swab reminds me of the bore punch in the military when, they would, after the Navy goes to port, they go in there and they say, all right, everybody, if your dick is dripping, here comes your bore punch. And they slam that Q-tip down your pee hole to check if you have an STD. So.
Nice graphic. I love it.
Yeah, there you go. The old bore punch.
Oh, this podcast will never be the same. Thanks, Morgan.